Good morning, everyone. I am Taylor Post, Swiftland's Office Manager, and I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Building Online Courses for Staff and Patrons, and today's presenter, Brian Pichman. Brian Pichman is the Director of Strategic Innovation at the Evolve project. He loves to share his knowledge and experience about innovative technology through presentations and hands-on demonstrations. Brian's passion stems from growing up in libraries and loves collaborating with both libraries and companies. He is dedicated to bringing libraries into the future using cost-effective measures and strategies. Much of Evolve's work includes helping libraries bridge the digital divide, break away from traditional library views, become trendsetters, and finding and building innovative projects geared towards interaction and collaboration. He has been working with startup companies across the country, promoting libraries and encouraging people to work closer with libraries in developing new ideas and concepts. In the end, Brian wants to change the way people see libraries. Please welcome Brian Pichman and enjoy his webinar this morning. Brian?
Hi everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Someone mentioned that there is an echo, but hopefully that's not coming from my end anymore. So today we're talking about building online courses for staff and patrons. I'm going to cover in a big picture way of how to build an online class and the components of that, and how we can then leverage these types of tools to either grow our staff and make them more efficient employees or more educated employees and grow their skill set, or do the same thing for patrons. And whether that's giving them certifications to work on specific types of makerspace tools or have access to different rooms or meetings. These are ways that a lot of companies and libraries and academic institutions employ to ensure that people understand what they're about to do. And I apologize that some of I had cute little icons, but for some reason they didn't like loading, so they look like random characters of text, but it won't impact any of the other slides. So goals for today. I'm going to switch and pull up a different slide deck. It looks like the images dropped out of this one, so give me a second. Cool. All right, so some goals for today. So as I kind of previously stated, what we're going to try to do is accomplish just online of how to build a learning management system. And this is a stepping point that we might be trying to build an in-person workshop of how to do these online classes. Does anyone else hear an echo? I will unplug and replug. Okay, I guess only for some people. Odd. All right. So anyway, as we were saying, I'm going to give you guys access to an online course as well that everyone can tinker and play with at the end. And then if it makes more sense, we can also turn this into a workshop in the future. But I'm kind of looking for people's feedback to see if this is something that makes sense and people that something that you want to do. So, what is an LMS? Does anyone know what an LMS is, or do you use one? And feel free to chat in the chat box. You might have ran into this while you were taking online classes through school or through continuing education. Gail mentions that LMS stands for Learning Management System. Correct. Someone mentions that a tool called Blackboard. Blackboard is a learning management system where it can store course materials, let people take tests, quizzes, exams, etc. Someone else mentions Canvas and Blackboard as well as other tools. But yeah, so learning management systems are essentially a way to store data and store content and deliver it through like an e-learning mechanism. If we use Facebook, if you will, how we upload content to Facebook and then it's shared, think of that, but LMS only focuses on the educational piece and how we can get people more trained. So learning management systems. So it encompasses three main things. We have learning, management of content, and the system being the software. So learning management systems allow us to deliver to any kind of educational resource. And that could be through video, through text, through people taking assessments, to people completing discussion boards, any way to allow for some type of educational transaction to occur. That's what the learning management system is for. In terms of management, what is it managing? It provides a way to organize and report and store information and allow specific access to pieces of information. For instance, let's say you were taking a class on how to use the makerspace. Your first module, if you will, or first thing you probably want to show someone to know is the do's and don'ts of a makerspace, like don't touch the hot things. And as they progressively get more and more acclimated to the environment, you might want to unlock new types of content for them to learn. Other people explain it as if you're reading a book, they don't want people to skip from chapter 1 to chapter 8, so you can lock out each page until they complete reading it, until they get the next one. But at the end of the day, it's a way to store and curate information, so it's digestible for people to use. And then the system portion is it's a piece of software that resides online, and it allows you to deliver this e-learning opportunity to the end user, whether it's your students or whether it's your staff or it's your patrons. So in general, this is like the grid of what a learning management system kind of entails, or what it requires to use to be successful. In order to get access to a learning management system, one of two things has to occur. You have to either be registered into the system, whether that's by you doing it manually or some admin taking a list of usernames and populating them in. Once you're registered, then they get authentication to specific pieces of the learning management system, whether that's a specific course, all the courses, and what kind of level of access they get out of that. Whether they're instructors or students, whether they can see other students' works. You can define all of that through the setup of the learning management system. And then at a top level, things that you would try to do or accomplish is it's supposed to be used for training, or other people use it as a resource. So if you forget how to do something, there's a learning management system where you can then quickly get the files you need. Then there's also the assessment piece. So whenever you onboard a new employee, one of the things I always like to kind of preach about is you want to make sure they are confident in the job. And so one way to measure that is do a quick assessment. It's the same thing that we had to do when we got all of our degrees. We were assessed to make sure we understood it before you can move on to the next step. And then the last piece is reporting. Depending on the learning management system you use, you can actually get detailed reports of how long someone read a section on the page, or how long someone looked at that PDF document you embedded on the website. So then you can actually know, are people reading the material? If they looked at it for 10 seconds, then you have a really good guess that they probably didn't digest that material or didn't take it seriously. So there's a lot of really great reporting functionality in learning management systems that allow you to understand how your users are using it, how they're learning, and what types of things you need to get more involved in. And then the big piece is our content management. So learning management systems, again, they manage your content. And whether that's through blogs, wikis, forums, podcasts, discussion boards, lots of tools allow you to collaborate. You can upload files, you can upload videos. And then the other side of it is your training workflow. So how do you progress through each training module? And then the course calendar lets you know when things are due or when new content is going to be unlocked. And in terms of your training modules, you have internal content, so stuff you develop that's inside the system. And then there's external content references. So some learning management systems can connect to plugins or other features or other for instance, textbooks. So you can actually have a textbook publisher give you their own content, and you can link whatever they do on the textbook's website back into your learning management system. So I say based off of that grid, we're kind of focusing on those 5 main core components. When you're talking about, and you can build your own where you can use existing tools. I'm going to walk through all that today. Some core components of the LMS is your access control. So we want to make sure we provide and restrict access to give content to those who need it or those who registered. For instance, if you're doing staff training, you don't need to train the the paid staff how to manage payroll. That's not something that they'll ever have to do, at least immediately. And so when you're developing an LMS, you got to make sure you build the correct access controls, and they're relatively straightforward. It's buttons and checkboxes. What type of user will it be, and what do they get access to? And at the same time, you want to also manage enrollment, so what courses they get. The other challenging piece with an LMS is hosting of the content. The LMS can store all this information, so you can upload PDFs, PowerPoints, pictures, whatever you want. You can save into the learning management system. But that also means that takes up space. So you want to make sure that your hosting provider can manage all this content and data. At the same time, you want to make sure it's restricted. You don't want to, if you had an internal document of how to arm the security system, that's probably not something you want publicly available. But keep in mind, when we build a learning management system, it's typically accessible from anywhere in the world. And so we want to make sure that documents we upload, we restrict the access to make it not public. And so you have to be inside this course in order to view this PDF. And again, the other piece of learning management system, it should be able to track access of content. Who's doing what, who's participating, who isn't participating. There's even tools that can figure out where a user scrolled on the page, if they scrolled really fast and how fast they scrolled. There's all sorts of really amazing plugins that help measure and track what people do. Communication channels. We want to make sure that the users of the LMS system can communicate to each other, or the instructors, or the facilitators. And so, whether that's through built-in course mail or through discussion boards, that's usually how you see people communicate. And then the last piece is we always have to measure to make sure people are retaining information. And so the best way to do that is to give assignments and quizzes and assessments. And so whenever you deliver content, and that way you always have to make sure what you're delivering to people is measurable. And by doing that, you measure the acceptance rate of the content. So if you were to train a whole bunch of people how to utilize the new iOS, and you gave them a quiz and everyone failed, one of two things occurred. The training didn't make sense, or the staff didn't take it seriously. And so these are things that you have to consider, and then you refine your approach. Say, hey, maybe this content, maybe people need a more hands-on instruction instead of videos we played. So then you take it back, you survey your users of who took it, and say, hey, how can we make you more successful in this role? And so it's a continued improvement opportunity. So how can we use an LMS in our library? You can use it as an interviewing mechanism. So I also manage a call center, and we support over 50 colleges and universities around the world. So we need a relatively large-sized team. Whenever schools start, we have to bring on a whole bunch of temporary workers, and I don't have the time to interview 50, 60 people. And so we built an LMS system where people have to log into a course and get an interview done. And the way we do it is we ask them a series of questions. We give them readings to read, because we want to make sure that employees that work at a call center can read a technical document and then answer some troubleshooting questions off of it. And so we built an entire interview process through a learning management system. We don't actually have to physically interview people, but we did need to make sure we assessed to see if people were viable candidates, if they took the job seriously. And so we took what used to be a 2-week interview project down to a couple hours, where we just review people's responses. People use LMS systems for employee or user orientation, or also called onboarding. And so some libraries don't have a person that trains. It's more of a, hey, you stand by the desk and you'll learn as you go. And that's sometimes stressful and challenging. But you can sit someone down. If you build it well, build it well once, you'll never have to repeat this process again. And you build a really great system where somebody can sit down, they watch videos, read PowerPoints, read a PDF, and then answer questions, submit documents, and then you can then sit down with them afterward to make sure they understood the material and follow up on anything they got wrong, versus having them trying to learn on the fly. The other thing that's useful with learning management systems is for employee training. So if you had to roll out like a diversity training for the entire staff, one way to make sure that you've done it and you can prove that you've done it is through a learning management system. So now you have a tangible report that shows employee A, B, and C all took the online class for diversity training and all passed with whatever percentage. And so that's a really amazing tool to make sure that employees are all trained, and it quote unquote certifies that they did get the training. And then you can use that as part of your review process. So if someone says, I was never taught that, you can go, well, hey, we actually had a training course. You passed said training course, so you did get the content. The other thing to do is refresher training. The amount of stuff that we have to do day in and day out, sometimes we forget the things we don't do as frequently. And so by putting together refresher trainings, such as, like one of my favorite examples is how to arm the security system. So when I worked at the library, only like 2 people knew how to do it, and when those 2 people were out and some alarm was tripped and we had to disarm and rearm, no one knew what to do because it wasn't a process we did every single day. And so we built a refresher training module around it, so every couple of months a different group of people would have to be in that module and relearn it. So then we had a more well-informed and well-trained staff without having to do anything special or extra, which then dovetails into knowledge retention, making sure that people are knowledgeable and they can retain the information. And the last piece is competency-based education, where people can use LMSs inside of an academic or public library to train people on those basic finance skills, or giving them, or computer-based skills, giving them the skills they need to be successful, whether that's in a career or applying for opportunities if it's for staff. Applying for opportunities if it's for your patrons. So there's lots of really great things we can use an LMS for that can better our library and make things a lot more efficient. So there's 3 main, I call them modules, within your learning management system. You have your communication module, administrator module, and learning modules. Your communication modules, those are anything that allows people to communicate and collaborate back and forth together. And that's forums, wikis, chats, emails, discussion boards, simply posting an announcement that everyone can see, or even running a webinar such as this. Lots of really great communication modules that are available in every single learning management system. Then you have the learning modules, and these are what's used to make sure that people can study materials or do other simple exercises. And so within your course management, you're able to then assign courses and assignments and tests to make sure that people understand what they were learning. And the last piece is more of your back-end process. So anyone that's administrating the course, you can even say instructors, you're not allowed to see these types of information. Your job is to only grade, and you can have a whole other group of people only do the administration end. And that could be tracking progress for individuals, monitoring trends for the group as a whole. And then you can look at this data and stats to find out, hey, do we need to do training differently? Do we need to cover security awareness more in depth because people seem to struggle across that module across our entire staff? And then you know what to do to fix and make your environment even better. So there's a few terms that to understand what's behind a team in a learning management system. There's some organizations that actually hire people to only work inside of a learning management system. For organizations, libraries, businesses even. They will hire and build a learning management team. And the members of that team is usually you have an instructional designer or course designer. And these are the people that develop the course. They understand how information is digested, so they know what types of content to use and whether it's video or PowerPoints. And sometimes they'll even help develop the content to be taught. If they don't know the content to be taught, they would usually partner with the subject matter expert, or SME is what they're abbreviated as, and then they would help them pull out information so we know what to build and what to train. The other 2 titles is usually instructor or trainer, someone that takes that pre-built information, or they build it themselves, and they push out a course to train those individuals. And if it's a big enough organization, they'll have another individual that only does the administration of the learning management system. And whether that's making sure the software is up to date, enrolling users, making sure that security permissions are correct, and that's your LMS administrator. And so then you have all these processes that occur. And I might have mentioned them a few times, at least now I'll give you kind of what they mean. So when we talk about learning management systems, you have what's called enrollment. Enrollment is simply putting people into courses. So you have your list of names, and you say, all right, this group of names goes to this course, this group of names go to that course. And it's usually a process that does it. So you have an Excel file, if you will, that has a name and a course, and you upload it. Now they're enrolled. Nothing fancy, no whole bunch of boxes to click through. It's a simple file that you can upload. The other one is, it's called course clone or course copy. When people develop courses online, they build what's called a master course. And the master course is never edited. It's like the untouched copy. And when people want to join a class, they take a copy of that master course and they make a copy of it so people can work on the copy. So that way, if there's ever tweaks that need to be made, you do it to the master and you copy as you need. It's basically preventing the too many hands in a cookie jar. An instructor may accidentally delete content because they don't think it's relevant, but at least it's still there in the master, so it's easy to restore. And so that's where course clone and copy come in. It takes an existing course and you build it into a new course. And then it can actually update your due dates based on a date range you give it. When we talk about training people with learning management systems, there's three ways to do it, 3 ways to roll it out. There's self-service, and that's essentially letting people enroll on their own. So users get enrolled. They're usually monitored to be completed by a specific date, but there's no instructor led. There's no one sitting behind them saying, "Hey, make sure you do these." They're doing it on their own. They're choosing what courses they like and what days they're supposed to be completed. On demand is also joining when they want, and monitoring as needed. And then instructor-led is taking specific due dates, learning sessions, and the instructor says what they're going to learn that week, what they're going to learn that day, and what they have to do. So in general, self-service, you enroll people. On demand, users can pick what they want to learn, and instructor-led is taking specific dates, and there's a facilitator throughout the whole thing. And they're making sure that people follow along together. The other two are kind of on your own. So with the learning management system, there is a lot of planning that's needed. There's a lot of work that goes into it before you even launch one, and I'm going to break that down for you as well. So when we're looking at a course, and the first thing that you're going to see is what's called modules. And the idea of modules are just containers of information, and they're usually grouped by a specific topic. So if we're rolling out a security policy, we would have a module based on computer security, and we would have a module based on personal security. Does that make sense? Or if it's a course that goes across 6 weeks, let's say, and you have something different stuff to teach each week, but you can't really put it into a bucket that give it a title. You can do week 1, week 2, week 3, and then every week people know to click on the next week to get their content. But the important part is each module should have the exact same structure. They should have some sort of learning resource, and again, that's a PowerPoint, a PDF, a video, and then something they can submit to make sure they understand the material, and that's your submissions piece. So here's a very simple learning management system. Customer care, so if we were to onboard people, and this is like an onboarding tool. So we have our customer care team teach them how to be really good with customer service. Then we have a module called Tools Used. And it's hard to see, but there's the attachment. The paperclip means it's a file attachment. So that's a PDF doc. That little graphic there next to tools is just reading. And there's also videos embedded, but the icon doesn't show. And then the last module is sites we support. So sites we work on, sites we want people to pay attention to. And we group it into buckets. And so you can't get to the next bucket until you complete the first one. Does that make sense? So our modules in this screenshot is customer care, tools used, and sites we support. So what's in a module? So I've talked about learning resources. And again, these are your simple study guides, reading materials, PowerPoints. You can even plug into third-party websites. So let's say, going back to security, if there's companies out there that teach you how to do physical security. So like what to do in an event. If you have a disgruntled patron, what do you do and how do you handle it? And there's services out there that you can link back into your learning management system. So if they click on a link, they go to a whole nother website with more interactive content. They complete it, and once they complete it, it sends what they completed and how well they did back to the learning management system. And so it's a really great tool, things to kind of look into and keep in mind of. The other piece is your submissions. And again, these are your assignments or activities or ways to assess if knowledge is retained. So if you had time, submissions of documents is one way, which then means you need to have someone that sits there and reads and views and make sure that they understood. Discussion boards are really great tools to get people to collaborate together. And so if you had an environment where it was difficult to get people to talk to each other, running a discussion board might help break that. So you can post a discussion and say, hey, for this assessment, I want you to post how you feel about security, and then reply to two people's posts about security, what they think is most important. And now you get people collaborating forcefully, but they're starting to collaborate and working together and viewing other people's submissions as information to digest. So if they miss something while they're reviewing on their own, they might be able to pick it up on the back end with this collaboration piece. Announcements are usually posted by instructor, and they're driven for like a call to action. So an instructor would say, hey, everyone, we need everyone to complete all these modules by the end of the month. Don't forget. And there's other social learning activities, and that can be done through wikis, blogs, podcasts, journals, all of which get embedded and saved to the learning management system, which is really great because let's say that individual had to go back because they had an issue or had a question, they didn't know how to handle it. At least they have a reference point of where to return so they can get that information. And then the other one is doing surveys, which allow you to do peer review. So you can let people survey each other's content. You can survey the class as well and say, hey, how was the information digestible and did it make sense? And the last one was that third-party plugins piece. And there's a lot of available options out there. In terms of like virtual classrooms, there's a whole slew of them. Ones you have to pay for are WebEx, Adobe Connect, and Blackboard Collaborate. Ones that are free and open source, Big Blue Button, and it works fairly well. And what's really great is if you embed Big Blue Button, let's say, into Canvas, a learning management system, all the users, no one has to type in their username when they hit Big Blue Button, because it says, hey, I see you coming from Canvas, your name is Brian, guess what your name is when you sign into this classroom? It's going to be Brian, and it does it all automatically. And on the back end, you can run reports to see, did Brian attend the live lecture? Yes or no? Then there's tools that check for plagiarism. There are open source ones, but they don't seem to last very long because they seem to get bought out. But there's Turnitin and Verisight are the two main ones. Then we have platforms that kind of extend what a learning management system can typically do. There's VoiceThread, which allows you to upload a PowerPoint and do audio recording over it. So you can allow people to kind of do their own presentations. So if you wanted to ensure that people understood material, one way to test it is say, present this material back to me. And they can then do that, use VoiceThread, upload their PowerPoint and video and audio record what it's about. Then there's tons of APIs that connect to textbook publishers, whether that's McGraw-Hill, Pearson, there's a whole slew of them, and they all can usually connect to almost every mainstream learning management system. And then there's the option for free and open source. So Kaltura is a free and open source tool that works for videos. So think of it as YouTube. And so if you want people to record videos and upload it back to your learning management system, and then be able to restrict sharing based off of who was in the class, it does that all automatically for you behind the scenes. So there's no sharing settings you have to click through to make sure you only share it to a specific group. The learning management system helps manage that security and access. And the last piece is proctoring tools as a third-party plugin. So if there was a need to make sure that people didn't cheat during their taking the exam portion of it, you can use a tool called Remote Proctor or Spondus that essentially makes you take a test in a browser that locks you from using anything else on your computer and only provides you access to what the browser's told you're allowed to use. And so it's a great, and then you can it'll also record webcam if you want. It can check, it'll have you scan your room to make sure there's no one else watching or helping you complete a test. And so there's a lot of great tools out there to streamline education. So here's what Big Blue Button looks, and that's that online classroom I talked about. And it looks almost similar to what we see right now in our Adobe Connect, except like mirrored. So on the right, you're able to share content, PowerPoints and presentations, and on the left is your chats, and who is in there and who's doing what. Everything else works the exact same, except for the fact it's free. This is Kaltura, or media space. And if you notice, it kind of looks like YouTube. It has people's names and what they've uploaded and the title, and people can click and go. Again, you can restrict it based off of who is in which class, and it syncs this all up automatically. Okay, so why use an LMS for basically training people or delivering content to people? There's a lot of really great ways to a lot of really great reasons to use learning management system. The first and most obvious is productivity. By implementing a learning management system, you can increase employee productivity because you give them something to do during downtime. There's always downtime, and so you can say, hey, during downtime, just go to our learning management site and complete a module. Do one module a month, and make sure you set it up so a module only takes 15 minutes. So make sure the reading takes less than 5, and make sure that the assessment portion takes less than 5, and you have a solid thing to do during a lull. And you can build 30, 40 of these modules, and you can spread them across a year, and now you can start really giving staff something to do during downtime, increases productivity, and then also makes them more efficient employees, or patrons even. Real-time access, you can get this. When you build a learning management system, you can access it anywhere around the world. And so this is really great if you have patrons that want to get continuing education type credits. But the library isn't open when they're off of work or when they're out of school. So you can build a virtual 24/7 library through a learning management system. So you can have reference material available. You can have content that teaches them how to do specific things. Or you can even have a course, if you will, on how to use the online resources or online databases. So now there doesn't need to be someone 24/7 available because the answers they need are in a well-developed course. We'll talk about your staff. When we've implemented learning management systems for different organizations, there's also a major boost in morale because people feel more confident at work because they had more training. People always talk about, I wasn't trained on this, or they're not confident on doing a specific job function because they don't know, they're not confident enough because they were never trained or they didn't get enough training. And so by having this learning management system available to them, now they're going to have a little bit more morale around it because they're going to use it. They're going to have confidence. They can collaborate together on it. And you can even use it to gamify your workplace. How many modules can you complete in a month? Or who scored the highest this month on the refresher training? Lots of really great options to encourage more collaboration, engagement through an LMS. LMS obviously also helps with cost savings because now you can decrease your training costs because you're going to rinse and repeat. Basically, you build the content once, it's always going to be there, it'll always be saved, you know exactly where it's at. When I worked at a library, we had different staff members work on different portions of training just because they did it. There was no organization behind it. So whenever we onboarded someone, we were never for sure who they needed to talk to because the information was scattered. So by putting this all into a system, it's all in one place, you know exactly where to go, so you can sit someone down and say, here's the courses you need to complete to be a member of this team. And the last one is it's data-driven. You're able to monitor people's progress and making sure that they have the skills they needed for that function, their job function, and also what opportunities there should be available for promotions. So back to my page example, not taking HR classes. Let's say that's something they were actually interested in. And so you can, if you build it right, you can give them courses on HR policies and help them start learning more about that HR function. So when there's that opportunity available, you already have someone trained up for it without having to waste time training. Because usually people only put in 2 weeks. So now you can focus less on the tools needed or the processes needed and get more of the day in and day out of what that employee does when you're doing that 2-week transition. And then lastly, it also helps with making sure you have your core competencies across the entire team. So making sure everyone knows how diversity works, making sure everyone knows how the ILS works, and then you can monitor that and see if it dips, and then you can know how to approach it or do like a A staff service day. Now your staff service days can be more direct because you know exactly where people are struggling, and that is what you would focus on during your staff development days. Oh. Again, kind of reiterate some of the other points. Lots of benefits. You can do your competency management, making sure that people have the core skills they need for the job, like such as how to use the phone system, how to put a book into the system, how the circulation process works. Soft skill training, how to prepare for disasters, diversity, communication strategies, customer service even. All these soft skills you can train and build into a course. Lastly is your role management. You can utilize the educational pieces of the learning management system to train people to understand what their roles are, what their core responsibilities are, and who can do what within an organization. And by doing something like this, you can track the maturity rate of an employee, making sure that they say that the best employees are the ones that always want to continue to learn. So if you're looking at all of your staff, if you will, and seeing who's continuing taking new classes, or who's taking new modules, or who's even reviewing modules consistently, those are the ones that want to continue learning. And so those are the ones you want to partner with to make sure that they continue to grow with your organization. And the last one is it helps with career pathing. Again, like we stated before, by building all the modules you need for every department, you can then make sure that people know what's available and start letting them learn the skills in advance to having the role, because then that makes it so much easier for your interview process. It makes it so much easier for onboarding them in that new role, because now you have all these people in the pipeline ready for the next opportunity, and it gives people something to look forward to. So let's say you built all your courses. Now you're ready to roll it out, or roll up those modules. There's two ways to do it. So inside your course, you can just open up all the modules so everyone can see every week or every content topic. The pros for that is it allows the most independent way of learning. The instructor doesn't have to be involved. People can kind of click and jump around where they see fit. If they struggle on a module, they don't have to overstress and say, oh, well, I can't move on because I don't see anything else. All at once is they can skip it and go somewhere else. Adaptive release is the concept of, in order to move from module A to module B, you have to complete X. And whether that's making sure you completed the assessment or you graded high enough on the assessment, or making sure they've read all the materials, then the next section will open. And I gave a couple examples there. All right, so now we're going to change gears and talk about what we need to look for when we're choosing an LMS. This is a kind of a big infographic, but I'll kind of highlight the most important things. Depending on your organization, how much data you want would probably be important. And so you want to make sure that the reporting mechanisms within that LMS suit your needs. Whether you want to report on how long people spend in a course, or if you wanted the automation of giving them badges when they complete, or certifications. The other pieces are, and I'll kind of quickly touch it, is reputation. Lots of reviews. Google to make sure that people are happy with the service. How accessible is it? The design, is it simple to use, easy to use? A really, really important one is your security aspect of it, making sure that the content you put on there is secure. Customer support, if you build something in-house, you're not going to necessarily get that help desk or vendor management solution. Or if you're using a free service, again, you're not going to get 24/7 support. You'll get whatever's free in the forum. And then the other ones is ease of use. And most LMSs now have figured out the secret sauce to building an easy-to-use platform. If you're unsure which one to choose, roll out a couple, do a couple trials, and say, hey, group of people, we're going to build a learning management system, but we need your insight to make sure we choose the one that makes the most sense for how you operate. Collaborative communication tools, you want to make sure that you can upload files to discussion boards. And then the functionality piece is making sure that, and you probably won't run into that, though, is making sure you can do plugins. It's scalable, so if you went from 30 staff members to 1,500 staff members, can that service that you chose support it? So that's kind of the things you kind of keep in the back of your mind when choosing. And I'll talk about the main ones. So there's lots of different options available. You have hosted, which is called software as a service. So you're in a hosted environment, you're paying somebody else money to not only manage the server, but also pay for the software. Then there's self-hosted, and that's where you bought the license to use the software, but you're going to run it on your own equipment, so you save a little bit of money. And then there's open source, and that's the idea of taking publicly available code and installing it on your own system. In the last slide, there was a comment about SCORM, SCORM, compliancy, and that basically means that it makes it sure that you can switch platforms easily. Think of it as a standard. So if I was in a learning management system called Canvas and I wanted to move to Blackboard, if it was SCORM compliant, I can easily take Canvas material and copy it to Blackboard. So Blackboard. It's one of the most popular and widely used learning management systems within higher education. And they offer through software as a service, so you can pay Blackboard a pool of money to have them manage your Blackboard instance, as well as pay for the license. There's other people that go, you know what, we have the equipment, we have the team that understands servers, we're going to host it ourselves. So that's self-hosted. And that's what Blackboard looks like. You see the modules on the left. You see your home page with the announcements, where there are nothing posted, what tasks are available, but that's essentially Blackboard. Canvas is one of the most popular open sourced options. There's software as a service, so again, that's where you pay Canvas. There's self-hosted, where you can buy the license and host the open source version. And there's also free software as a service. So Canvas will actually let you build courses for free on their platform without having to pay. There are file limits, like 250 megabytes is your limit, but if you wanted to build your own Canvas course, the link is there. Moodle is another open, and I gave the trial links. Moodle is another open source option. They recently updated the entire interface like 2 years ago, so it's a lot easier to use. So if you heard of Moodle like more than 5 years ago, it looks a lot different and works a lot better than it does. Works a lot better today than it did back then. But again, similar setup. These folders you see on the left are your modules. Then there's another company called Desire to Learn. It's been recently bought by a company called Brightspace. And it's a software as a service platform, so you pay someone else to host and manage the license. Adobe Captivate Prime is newer. It's software as a service, but it's inexpensive. It's $4 a month per user. And they'll do education rates or group bundled rates. So you'll just have to reach out to find out more competitive pricing. But as a whole, if you had a small team or you're working on a project where you wanted to have everyone trained equally, it's $4 a month per person. So when we're talking about building management systems and rolling one out, you got to make sure you have your vision set up. You got to make sure you have to basically plan everything out on pen and paper. That's how I always like to say it before you start playing online. So making sure that everything makes sense. Put it on a whiteboard. Make sure your workflow achieve your goals. So, So one of the best ways when you roll out a learning management system is explain it to your staff. Explain the benefits and create learning buckets. So hey, there's a lot of communications opportunities here. We can help train you better. We can help find promotions better. Or just do a simple survey. What do you want to learn more about? And now you know what type of content to start building. Another piece is you want to create learning buckets. So in terms of each department, what functions do they need to be successful? And then do you have training for them now? And then you take the training and you plug it into your learning management system. And so by doing these two things, you can really roll out a successful learning management system. When we're talking about on-demand or doing refresher training, there's like do's and don'ts that I've learned over the years. So they are, when you build an on-demand course, do it for onboarding or training new employees, and do it for every position. Thanks. It took a while for me to train the cat to drive. But for when you're onboarding, just build the course and let people sit down into it. And then we take our work buckets, those skills we need for each organization, and we split it out across 6 or 12 containers. So every month you can do a different set of learning. Have a mix of customer service centric based learning. So how to be empathetic, how to talk, nicely, how to brand your organization. And then you have your technical job function, so how to use the ILS, how to use the phone system, and then process-based training, such as how do you file a claim if a book comes back damaged. And then the other thing that we found is you want to always require due dates, and we make the due dates for everything at the end of the month. So every month you have a new set of learning, or if you get onboarded, you have 1 month to go through all the training modules, and make sure everyone's required to complete it. And if they don't complete it, have a discussion why. You can even set it up so you have two basically, you can build 2 tests. Test A is if you complete it on time, it's shorter. If you don't finish everything on time, you get the longer test. And there's lots of cool tricks you can do around that. One of the other pieces is data is only good if you act on it. So if a whole group fails, so essentially these are your big wins. If everyone that fails an assessment, then chances are the training wasn't sufficient. If a single person fails, find out how long they spent on looking at the content. If they looked at it for 5 minutes, chances are they sped through it. If they looked at it for 5 hours, chances are they didn't absorb it correctly or they weren't taking it seriously. Then you got to determine what happens if someone fails this. We onboarded this new employee and they bombed every single assessment. So what do? Do a retake. So what we've done is you retake the test, but now there'll be more questions on it. And you have to look at content more in depth. Or do an in-person session. So sit down with someone now, and we go module through module of everything they failed to make sure they get it. Give them that one last chance. But you want to make sure people take it seriously. And so make your test scores part of the annual performance review. High performers will be able to easier to identify, and you can also tie those to promotional opportunities. Lots of practices for best outcomes. You want to build what's called a test bank. And so you write 20 questions, and then you can set your module to pull only 10 questions from that bank, and it pulls it randomly, which is really great because Bob and Janet can't sit next to each other and go question by question because there's a good chance that they're going to get fairly different tests. And if they do sit next to each other trying to take the test, at least now they're going to be seeing more questions, and so it's a win because they're going to learn more. Define what a failure rate is, and I say anything less than 80. If you're not an A or B player, you're not a good member of the team. Or if you're using this for patrons, same thing. If you're not an A or B patron, you shouldn't use the video equipment until you pass, because you want to make sure that people are competent in the tools you provide. Again, everything should be due by the end of the month. Don't make assumptions. If someone doesn't complete it, assume it's a failure and say, hey, you failed this exam. And they might say, well, I didn't take it. It's not my fault. Well, it is because we said it was due by the end of the month. And then again, that's where you determine what to do. Let's say they continue to fail month over month. Some organizations go through the corrective action route because it's part of your performance. Hey, you're not doing too good with this training portion of the job. You've got to take it seriously. Work harder towards it. Give people multiple chances to take a test, and we chose a number of 2. So the first time you took it, you might have been nervous, but at least it gives you that reality check of, hey, maybe I need to look at this content again. So then they try it again. Never show the questions if they fail, because we don't want them to use the test to take the test. And again, making sure if you're using that question bank method, when they take the test again, they're going to get new questions. When we're talking about patrons, one of the best ways that I've seen it is for makerspaces. So if you have a 3D printer, build a training course for it. So in order to use the 3D printer, they take the resource seriously by learning how to use it. And so build a simple training course, let them take it from home, let them take it anywhere in the world, but at least now you can assess them and making sure they know how to use it. And the best thing to do is, do you accept these rules and responsibilities? Make that a question and have it a yes or no. And if they choose yes, they pass. because now it's a way to prove that they did agree to the rules that you put in place. Another big one that I liked using it for was continuing education. Build courses as your job aids, how to use Microsoft Office, for instance, how to write your resume, and build all these really simple to use courses that are plug and play. So people from anywhere in your community can go at home and go, hey, I want to learn how to use Word today. They click the link, they get enrolled, and they go through the opportunity. And it's also a really good way for people that are necessarily uncomfortable asking for help. So I used to do training for basically Microsoft Office in our library, so patrons that wanted to learn how to use the computer essentially would come to me. And there were so many patrons that would say, Brian, I was super nervous to ask for help for like the last 3 years because I felt that everyone else knew how to use a computer except me. And I finally worked up the courage. So what if we made it more simple for them by giving them that link and saying, hey, you want to learn how to use Word, PowerPoint, Excel, we have an online course for you. Just click on it and go through it. And what's awesome is there's people that have already developed these courses online, and you can simply download them and upload them to your own course. So you don't always have to make the content. So here's a couple resources that you can use while you're planning for an LMS or how to choose one. And so there's 3 different links. The first one is how to basically improve your organization. The second one is how to choose. It is outdated, but it gives some really good examples of what you can look for, and also will help you kind of pitch it too if you need. And then a project plan if you're migrating from one LMS to another. So if you wanted to do a test drive, I created a Canvas course for you. And it's on the next slide, but this slide here is how you can get to your own Canvas instance, build your own and play. Or in highlighted in yellow, it gives you the steps of how to download and build your own. Oh, the text got a little messy there. So setting up so we're going to talk about Canvas in the last couple of minutes here. If everyone wanted to click on that link, and I'll just talk about it high level, but after this webinar, I encourage you just to email me, and I can help you do these steps, because it takes a little bit more hand-holding. But the first thing to do is create an account. You get 250 megabytes for free to build your own courses, and you can build as many courses as you like, as long as they fit with under 250 megs. Create your content based on the different types of learning styles. Some people like to learn through videos, some people like to learn through reading, so when you build a course, you've got to include both. With grading, make sure you build your assessments, make sure that you can measure the effectiveness. And the last piece is when you're ready to go live with your course, there's a publish button. All you gotta do is hit it. The other piece is you want to make sure you enable self-enrollment if you're allowing other people to join. So here's what the screen looks like. When you go to course settings, there's a button that says unpublished or published. When you click published, it now makes it accessible to the world. To enable self-enrollment, all you have to do is when you're in that course settings page, there's a button that says more options. When you click on it, you see a couple extra options. And there's a checkbox that you got to choose that says let students self-enroll. When you do that, you'll get a link. So I built a very simple course that people can play in, and the link is here. So if you wanted to join that course and play around and click on things, you can, and that's the link down there. Next slide. So that was learning management systems as a whole, how to use it, how to kind of onboard, and kind of the do's and don'ts. Hopefully this answered a lot of questions for people or concerns, or at least gave you the information you need so you can kind of dive in on your own. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns? People are currently typing, hence my awkward silence. Yes, I can make sure that those links are sent with the recording. Someone asked if you can email each of us the links appearing on the last two pages for the free Canvas website. If you offered online class in the library, what was the difficulty you approached? In terms of getting it started, or what the concerns were people had? Okay, so both. So when we were starting it, one of the concerns was, and it's the obvious one, is if people don't know how to use a computer, how they're going to use the online class. And so we focused less on how to use a computer as a course and more of like more advanced things. And so we were able to then kind of augment. We were able to sit down with people, do a quick how to use a computer, and then we did how to use the learning management system or how to use this site. And then we were able to then dive into more in depth. Um, Cost-wise, we did the free and open source method works well. If you're buddy with your IT team and they can give you a server, give it a try. I'm a big proponent of call it a pilot program or a beta program. That way, if it fails, you can say, hey, it was a pilot, so it was supposed to fail. The PowerPoints will be shared. I'll convert them to a PDF doc too, so the logos and graphics and everything look a little bit cleaner.
If that is it for the questions, I will go ahead and close this out. And yes, you will be getting the slides, and the recording will be uploaded to the Swiftland website um, for your convenience. And thank you, Brian, for an informative webinar. Attendees, if you enjoyed this webinar, we ask that you join us on June 11th for Brian's next webinar, Maker Webinar Exploring Educational Technology Under $100. As always, we encourage you to keep an eye on the Swiftland CE calendar, the Swiftland Facebook page, or your message from the listserv. Thank you everyone for attending and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.